Henry woke up each morning at the break of dawn, ready to guide his bright yellow city bus through the winding roads of Maplewood Heights. He had been a bus driver for nearly a decade, a role he had embraced wholeheartedly after years of jumping from job to job. There was an illustrious energy to mornings on his bus route. The clanking of seatbelt buckles, the rustle of newspapers, the shuffle of feet. Over time, he came to realize that no one on the bus was just a passenger. They were people with stories, hopes, and fears. It was this realization more than anything else that fueled Henry's big heart and made him want to improve the lives of those who rode with him every day. His day began with an early cup of coffee, a few moments to survey the rising sun, and the knowledge that he would soon be behind the wheel. Maplewood Heights had a small town feeling, despite slowly transforming into a bustling suburb. The route Henry drove was as familiar to him as his own living room, Main Street to Elm Road, turning at Preston Avenue, passing the old library, and continuing into the more residential neighborhoods. He recognized every dip in the pavement, every ragged stretch of sidewalk, so well that he could drive it in his sleep. Yet what made the route special wasn't just its predictability, but the unique mix of passengers who boarded each day. Some were retirees, grateful to have someone greet them with a smile. Others were middle-aged workers heading to offices downtown. Then there were the children, bright-eyed students lugging backpacks heavier than their small frames seemed to allow. Henry prided himself on knowing at least a little something about each of his regulars. He'd remember who had an important job interview, or whose grandchild had recitals, or who liked to read on the bus ride. He'd ask after them, sharing a quick hello that might blossom into a short conversation. And in this daily exchange, Henry found a sense of purpose. Still, something always felt missing. He couldn't quite place it until one rainy autumn afternoon when he passed a mother sitting with her two children near the front of the bus. The kids were complaining of boredom, and the mother rummaged through her bag, offering them snacks and crayons, but they were unimpressed. Henry's eyes flicked to his own battered paperback on the dashboard, a beloved edition he used to read whenever he had a break. He offered the kids the book to look at while they rode. Though the content was too advanced, the children were fascinated by the physical object itself, flipping through pages enthralled by the idea of reading something new. When they stepped off at their destination, the mother tried to give the book back, but Henry insisted she keep it. "Pass it on," he said, almost without thinking. After she thanked him profusely and left, he felt something blossom inside his heart. A simple, kind gesture had sparked a little bit of magic that day. From that moment on, he realized that the physical act of sharing a book could open a door to imagination, curiosity, and learning for people stuck in long commutes. Over the next few weeks, Henry mulled over how to expand that feeling. He didn't just want to share a single copy of a book, he wanted to share many. And he remembered how years ago someone had told him about a traveling library in another state. He didn't have an RV or a trailer, but he did have a city bus. Certainly, the confines of the seats and aisles might prove challenging, but he couldn't think of a more delightful environment to turn into a small library, if only for a few minutes each day. The transition began gently. It started with a cardboard box placed near the front, labeled "Free Books, Take One, Leave One." He filled it with a handful of his own favorites, hoping that others would do the same. The first few days were slow. People were curious but hesitant, inclined to merely glance at the sign. Some bus riders whispered to one another about the odd initiative. But eventually, a young woman who always boarded with headphones around her neck picked out a mystery novel, then gave a shy smile to Henry as she dropped in a worn-out romance in return. A small chain reaction began. Soon, Henry noticed that the box seemed to carry a different set of books every day. Some were brand new, others dog-eared with notes scribbled in the margins. There were dictionaries, children's picture books, science fiction anthologies, and self-help guides. And with every departure or arrival, Henry's bus turned into a place of discovery. Older passengers recommended novels to younger ones. Children swapped comic books and read stories together. More frequent riders took breaks from their phones and started leafing through pages before and after their rides. Maplewood Heights might still be sleepy, but on Henry's bus, a quiet revolution of curiosity had begun. Encouraged by the box's success, Henry wanted to do something bigger. something that transformed the entire atmosphere of the bus into a haven for literary excitement. He spoke to his supervisor, Terry, a kind soul who looked up from her desk with an amused expression. Henry explained his traveling labor idea in greater detail, proposing small shelves attached at certain spots to hold the books more securely. He shared stories of how people had been taking and leaving books, how the writers had begun talking to one another about their discoveries. He wanted official permission to integrate shelving into his bus, to decorate it in a way that would promote reading, and to possibly host small reading sessions during quieter hours. Terry listened carefully, nodding as a smile slowly spread across her face. While these improvements seemed unconventional, Henry's passion shone through. She told him it was an unusual request, but that she'd see what she could do. "We need to check city guidelines," she said. "We want passengers safe, but I love the idea. Don't give up." Patiently, Henry waited for an official response. Meanwhile, he continued adding more books to the cardboard box, replacing it every so often as it got worn out. He created small posters, hand-drawn with colored markers, urging people to read during your ride or pass a story on. He even organized impromptu read-aloud sessions when the bus wasn't too crowded. The children especially adored those times, snuggling into their seats and hanging on to every word. Henry would give dramatic readings, adopting different voices, delighting them with the adventures found in the stories. It gave him a purpose beyond just driving from stop to stop, and it created a sense of community among people who had once been mere strangers. One day, an older gentleman named Arthur approached Henry. He had ridden the bus for years, usually clad in a fedora and a tweed jacket, always polite but reserved. Arthur handed Henry a paperback with trembling hands. "I've held on to this for decades," he said quietly. "It's my favorite novel from when I was young, and it's what made me fall in love with reading in the first place. I want other people to experience the joy it gave me." Henry accepted the book as though it were a rare treasure, promising Arthur that he would ensure it found its way into appreciative hands. Moments like this confirmed to Henry that the traveling library concept was more than a gimmick. It was forging connections, bridging gaps, and uniting the community under a shared love of reading. A few weeks later, Terry called Henry into her office. She had a grin that hinted at good news. Approval had come through for small, lightweight shelving installed near the rear of the bus, as well as for a few standing racks near the front doors. These shelves would be enough to hold a modest number of books without sacrificing passenger safety. Officially, Henry was the guardian of Maplewood Heights' first traveling library on wheels. Enlisting the help of a local carpenter, Henry had the shelves fitted over a weekend. He painted them in bright, inviting colors that matched the bus's cheery exterior. On Monday, he unveiled the new look. There were small but neatly organized rows of books, labeled by subject or reading level. People were amazed to see their local bus transformed into something akin to a miniature library. Even passengers who admitted they hadn't read a book in years showed a flicker of interest. As time went on, Henry's vision soared. He created a story corner at the back of the bus where parents could sit with their kids and page through children's storybooks. He posted a rotating book of the week near his driver's seat, giving a quick synopsis to anyone curious enough to ask. One day, a team who frequently rode to a part-time job read one of the recommended books and told Henry it was the best story she'd encountered, saying, "I didn't think reading could be this much fun." Hearing that reaffirmed the reason he had put so much love into this endeavor. Local media outlets soon caught wind of the traveling library. A reporter for the community paper hopped on the bus and took several photos, interviewing both Henry and the passenger. "What inspired you to do this?" she asked, curiosity flooding her voice. "A simple act of kindness," Henry replied, recalling the day he first handed that worn paperback to a bored child. He explained that reading was a tool that anyone could use to explore new perspectives, gain knowledge, or just escape into other worlds. When the piece ran in the Maplewood Heights Gazette, it sparked even more excitement. People who had never ridden the bus were coming just to see the traveling library, some bringing donations of books, others simply wanting to experience the warm atmosphere. One unexpected day, Henry was about to turn onto Elm Road, where there was a particularly busy intersection. A police officer waved him down, signaling him to pull over. Worried that he might have done something wrong, Henry cautiously opened the bus door. However, the officer stepped on with a grin and introduced himself as Officer Daniels, explaining he had heard about the traveling library and wanted to donate a large box of children's detective stories. Everyone on the bus clapped and thanked him as he placed the box on the shelf. The sense of communal pride was palpable. Soon, local businesses joined in the spirit. A bakery began hosting monthly book and pastry coupons, offering a free pastry to anyone who could show they had borrowed a book from the traveling library on Henry's bus. It wasn't all smooth sailing, of course. The city's budget was tight, and not everyone appreciated the changes. Some grumbled that the shelves took up space and that passengers might accidentally drop books in the aisles. A few even complained that reading on public transport was too distracting and that they preferred mindlessly scrolling on their phones. But Henry took the feedback solemnly, ensuring the shelves were kept tidy, the aisles clear, and that reading sessions didn't become disruptive. He placed a small sign politely reminding everyone to respect fellow passengers. Moreover, he reminded them that the traveling library was optional, never forced. Those who wanted to read could do so, those who didn't were free to ignore it. Unforeseen blessings emerged from this new bus culture. Children who once squabbled over seats were now sitting together in amicable clusters, discussing the pictures in the storybooks. Strangers who had previously avoided eye contact struck up conversations about the novels they had read. A sense of warmth filled the bus, so much so that more people wanted to ride this particular route, even if it meant a slightly longer commute. A high school English teacher named Miss Graham boarded the bus one afternoon, carrying a box of gently used classics, Dickens, Austen, Hemingway. "I think it's wonderful what you're doing," she told Henry, beaming with admiration. She started leaving reading lists for interested teens, pointing them to the traveling library shelves, explaining how the classics they'd read could boost their understanding of literature in school. Henry watched as young writers began dipping into these canonical works, an endeavor that might have struck them as tedious if forced in a classroom, yet felt more like an adventure, reading them during a bus ride in a supportive environment. Once the local senior center took note, they launched a weekly Golden Readers Hour. Retirees who struggled to visit the public library regularly, owing to limited mobility, began meeting on Henry's route, selecting books and discussing them. Some even wrote their impressions and suggestions on sticky notes placed at the book's front, leaving personal recommendations for the next person to pick it up. This circulation of knowledge and sentiment steadily increased, weaving a literary tapestry that spanned different age groups, backgrounds, and interests. A turning point arrived one chilly winter evening. Heavy snow had begun falling, and ridership was lower than normal. Henry spotted a little boy standing alone at a bus stop, clutching a small backpack. The child stepped aboard, shivering as Henry greeted him warmly. The boy mumbled that his mother was at work and that he had nowhere else to go until she came home. Based on the child's timid manner, Henry guessed he was anxious. He started talking to him about the traveling library, pointing out a few children's books that he might enjoy. With wide eyes, the boy carefully slid a picture book off the shelf. "Can I really read this now?" he asked, unbelieving. Henry nodded. The boy curled up in one of the seats, burying himself in the story as the bus made its usual rounds. At the end of the day, Henry made sure the child was safely dropped off at the community center, which was open late as a warming shelter. The boy left with his new book tucked securely under his arm, as though it were a priceless artifact. In that small action, Henry saw how the traveling library offered more than entertainment. It was a resource that could bring hope and reassurance to someone who needed it. The next day, Henry spotted the same child waiting again. This time he had two books with him, one to return and one to donate. He bounced onto the bus and showed Henry, explaining he had found a book at home he was too old for and wanted another kid to enjoy it. Henry felt a wave of gratitude and knew he was witnessing the seeds of a reading habit that could stay with the child for life. Acts of generosity like that started surfacing among the younger passengers. Kids would pool together collections of comics to share, or they'd propose reading races, something that turned the daily commute into a fun challenge. Eventually, the traveling library had a minor upgrade. A few kind volunteers from the Maplewood Public Library donated sealed book bags so riders could safely transport their borrowed books without worrying about damage from the elements. There were official library brochures to guide those who might want a fuller selection, with instructions on how to apply for a library card if they didn't already have one. Henry began collaborating with the librarians who sometimes hopped onto the bus for special events. On one occasion, they staged a pop up book signing by a local children's author on board. Proud parents and excited kids attended, while others, who merely boarded for their routine trip, discovered a spontaneous literary celebration. Before long, the impact of Henry's bus spread beyond Maplewood Heights. Copycat initiatives sprang up on other city bus routes, with different drivers placing small baskets or shelves of books. Some local teachers started assigning a bus reading log for students to fill whenever they borrowed books. It was as if an entire new world had opened up on each route. Words, phrases, ideas traveling up and down the streets, bridging the gap between neighborhoods. Whenever Henry caught a glimpse of someone lost in a story or heard the soft turning of pages, it reminded him of how powerful even a simple, heartfelt idea could be. Henry never viewed himself as a hero, but passengers often insisted he had changed their lives in small but meaningful ways. A young woman in her 20s said she had found her love for reading again, discovering new authors who made her days brighter. An older man claimed it helped him cope with loneliness because the bus now felt like a community space where he could meet new people. Even busy professionals admitted it encouraged them to look up from their devices and connect with their fellow riders. And Henry's own life felt enriched beyond measure, as if every person who stepped onto the bus had a unique gift to share through their perspective, their stories, their book recommendations. At times, Henry experienced doubt. Was he truly making a long-term difference, or were these just fleeting moments of novelty? But those doubts would dissolve whenever someone boarded with a smile, gave him a wave, and immediately perused the shelves. He saw children gently tucking picture books into their backpacks, adults immersed in new releases, and seniors eagerly flipping through the pages of long-lost favorites. The energy that once felt missing from Henry's daily routine now flowed freely with every hum of the engine, every turn of a page, every jingle of the bus's doors. 1 year later, he found himself reflecting on all that had changed since that day he handed a worn paperback to a bored child. The cardboard box had been replaced by sturdy shelves. People were no longer startled by the project, but rather expected it, even looked forward to it. The traveling library became an institution that symbolized the closeness of Maplewood Heights, capturing the essence of a community that valued kindness and learning. Henry also realized how far a single act of generosity could spread, rippling out in waves to touch countless lives. On a brisk spring morning, the bus was packed with regular passengers and a few new faces. Henry nodded to each one as they boarded, thinking about how this was more than just his job, it was a calling. A young mother sat next to a senior citizen who politely offered to read a picture book to her toddler. Across the aisle, two teenagers compared memorable quotes from the new fantasy series they were both reading. Henry guided the bus through its well-worn path, joy filling him as he saw strangers turn into companions through shared literary excitement. Life went on in Maplewood Heights, but the bus remained a consistent place of solace, imagination, and unity. The traveling library might have started from a small spark of empathy, but it grew into a flame that warmed hearts. People learned more about each other, forging bonds over paragraphs and chapters. Children discovered the infinite worlds that reading could unlock, fueling curiosity that would serve them well into adulthood. And Henry, behind the wheel, day in and day out, was now more than a driver. He was a storyteller, in his own way, facilitating an evergreen collection of tales that sprang to life in the hands of his passengers. Though he didn't have a cape or superpowers, Henry found that doing good often required little more than compassion, creativity, and the willingness to turn a simple idea into reality. In the quiet hum of the bus engine, accompanied by the rustle of turning pages, Maplewood Heights found a renewed sense of community. That bustling route turned into a wellspring of wonder where riders could escape into stories or connect with each other over a shared literary treasure. And any time doubt crossed Henry's mind, all he had to do was look around at the sea of open books and enthralled expressions to remember that, yes, a single bus could indeed drive literacy forward one story at a time.